Welcome to this week's episode of Going Rogue with Lara Logan. As you can see, we have had a fabulous studio upgrade. No, I'm just kidding. Unfortunately, this is not my studio. We are on the road this week, so our show is coming to you from Rogue on the Road. And what we're talking about this week is a subject of such significance. We have actually addressed this on the show before. It affects every single American, actually. It affects people all over the world. And we got some new information that we think is quite significant. So we're coming back to one of our most popular interviews on the show, and that is with someone called Aaron Siri. Now, some of you in the audience may know Aaron. He is an extraordinary lawyer, senior partner in a very important law firm, but is best known to people for his work as lead counsel for ICAN, which is the Informed Consent Action Network. So what are we actually talking about? Informed consent. What does that really mean? Well, informed consent, very simply, is that we are supposed to be informed. We have the right, every single one of us in America, to be informed about a medication. And we can either give our consent based on that information, or we can withhold it if we want to. And you cannot be forced to do something against your will. Now, what is the origins of informed consent? Well, it really comes from the Second World War. Why? Because of the absolutely horrific practices of the Nazis, particularly of the man known as the Doctor of Death, Dr. Joseph Mengele, who throughout history will always be remembered as one of the most vindictive, cruel, psychopathic, and absolutely reprehensible people ever to have walked the face of the earth for the horrific, absolutely horrific things that were done mostly to Jewish people in the Second World War and Mengele's programs, but not only to Jewish people, also to Germans and to Romani, to Gypsies. And unfortunately, there is evidence that some of Dr. Joseph Mengele's practices from the times of the Nazis in the Second World War have continued since then. But that's another subject. The point is, the real point is that what Dr. Joseph Mengele did to mostly Jewish people in the Second World War was judged by the world to be so utterly horrific that it could never, ever, ever be allowed to happen again. Like doing medical experiments on pregnant Jewish women, right? Things that you can never, ever justify. And so what was born out of this horror was the Nuremberg Code. And these are the laws internationally that are reflected in the doctrine of informed consent, that we cannot be forced to do things against our will. So Aaron Siri is a man who has really given much of his life to helping people protect those rights, and particularly parents, and particularly when it comes to the vaccine schedule. Now, this is something that, really came home to every American during COVID, of course, with all of the vaccine mandates, but it is something that still affects parents every day across this country. It affects soldiers going into the military. It affects people in the workplace. It affects people traveling across the world. It affects all of us. And more than that, the principle of informed consent really applies and should apply to every single human being on the planet. So Aaron Siri did something that was a little bit unusual this week. It really caught our attention, right? My team here, I have to be honest, it caught my amazing producer's attention, Alison Royal, and she brought it to my attention, and I jumped on it immediately because why? Because he posted something that, according to Aaron, and I had a long conversation with him about this, we spoke for hours, this came from someone that he had been in contact with before. It was an email that had all of the original markings, according to Aaron, when he received it. Now, he removed those markings to protect the source. He also removed the metadata. And this person that he has been in contact with claims to be a member of Kaiser Permanente, which is one of the largest non-profit medical organizations in the entire country. We went to their website to get it straight from them in their own words, who they are and what it is they do. And so this is how they describe themselves. Kaiser Permanente uses a unique integrated care model that combines health insurance coverage and healthcare, hospitals, clinics, doctors, under one organization. This prepaid membership-based system emphasizes coordinated care, prevention, and efficiency. Doctors focus on medical decisions without traditional insurer interference. Okay, so basically, Kaiser Permanente, often just called Kaiser, is one of the largest not-for-profit integrated healthcare organizations in the United States. So they're huge. Okay, when you talk about Kaiser, you are not talking about one or two hospitals. This is a massive health organization. And what Aaron believes that he received is from an email with guidance that was sent out to employees at Kaiser. Now, of course, we've been to Kaiser and we've talked to them about this, and we will tell you what they have said in response. Having dealt with the original communications, Aaron feels very confident that it is that this is real, and according to his conversations, this is also consistent with other conversations that he has had with other members of hospitals and other health organizations all over the country and over a fairly significant period of time. So when he received this, he said the problem he normally has is he talks to people about this all the time, but usually they're too afraid to lose their jobs, they're too afraid to get into trouble, and they don't want to provide him with the documentation. And that's what was different this time around. And according to the email that he got, and you got to forgive my old eyes here, because it's printed, but it's hard to read. In fact, I'm gonna go to Aaron Siri's X page, because that's where you can find it. You can see it for yourself, and I can read it a little bit better there. I can make it bigger. I thought I was gonna be able to pull it off, but I failed, America. Okay, so here, this is what the employee told him were the instructions that they are given in how to communicate with parents of newborn babies about the hepatitis B vaccine. Now, what is significant about the Hep B vaccine, in this case especially, is that it is the one vaccine that is administered at the hospital. So when your baby is born, boom, they get the hepatitis B vaccine. Now, you are entitled as a parent under US law to informed consent, which means that you can actually decline to give your child this vaccination. And many parents do decline to give their children this vaccination. In fact, ICAN and Aaron Siri have sent out, according to Aaron, hundreds of letters of demand to various hospitals all over the country where parents have in writing specific instructions to the hospital where they have said, we are withholding our consent. We do not want our child to get this vaccine. And the hospitals have gone and vaccinated their children anyway. Now, they have settled a number of these cases, not for huge amounts of money. Aaron said it's more like $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, right? This is, most law firms wouldn't even consider taking a case like this against a hospital, because hospitals have, huge law firms to defend themselves. They have lots of money, and they will take, they're not afraid of a fight. So what is this really about? It's about the principle, right? It's about that it may only be $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000, which can be a lot to some people, not a lot to the hospital, but they're admitting that they violated informed consent, which is the same as in principle violating the Nuremberg Code, which is violating one of the most important principles on the face of the earth, which is our right as human beings to decline a medication so that it cannot be forced on us. And if you want a little example of why that matters, well, for example, during COVID, there were people that were investigating, Del Bigtree, my friend Del Bigtree at the Highwire was one of them, who were looking into aerosol vaccines, right? Where you could just vaccinate an entire population or a city or a town or whatever it happened to be, a geographic area, from the sky, and say that you're doing it for the benefit of the country or the benefit of the town or the benefit of the people or whatever it happens to be. Now, Del told me he was never able to establish whether, how widespread this was, how advanced it was, whether it was ever used. He doesn't think it ever was. That's not the point. The point is that the technology is being worked on where you can have mass vaccinations of entire populations with or without their consent from the sky. That's why getting rid of the Nuremberg Code is so important worldwide. That's why getting rid of violating uninformed consent cannot be tolerated, not for anything. Even if it was a good thing, it can't be tolerated, because as a principle, when you use that thing for good, you can also use that thing for bad. So this is why Aaron's story, this post on X, this information that someone was willing to share with him is so relevant and important to parents and to people, not just across America, but actually all over the world. Here's an important message from someone who is very important to me, my friend, Dr. Stella Emanuel. In the times that we live in, with weaponization of medicine and constant threats from viruses, being prepared is essential, and having the right medicines in your medicine cabinet can mean the difference in your family's survival. We saw this during COVID. Off-label use of ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine kept many people alive. It kept me alive and people in my own family. Dr. Stella Emanuel has been at the forefront of getting Americans prepared and getting you what you need to survive. She has been a voice of hope during our darkest times, and she's still keeping Americans healthy and prepared today. So go to her website. You can find her at marketplace.drstellamd.com/Lara, and you can stock up on all of these essential medicines. You can also make a telehealth appointment in all 50 states. So once again, that is marketplace.drstellamd.com/Lara. Be prepared and do not be scared. So what is it about this that is so concerning? What is it about this that got our attention? So this, according to what Aaron has posted here, newborn medications at birth, standard communication and scripting. Now, as a journalist, of course, the word scripting bothers me because it just implies something that is so heavily managed. You always worry about what happens to the truth when people are kept on script. But that's just personal. That's just me. So that's an aside. That's just an opinion. I'd like to take a moment to align our approach to how we introduce and administer routine newborn medications at birth. Vitamin K, erythromycin eye ointment, and the hepatitis B vaccine. Okay, and so just a reminder here that hepatitis B is a virus that is typically contracted through unprotected sex or intravenous drug use. Obviously, neither of which apply to a newborn baby. Now, there are rare cases of horizontal infection, which is where your baby gets it from the mother, and that is typically in where you have a mother that may not have access to medical care during pregnancy. So you're more underserved communities. It's very difficult to get exact figures on that, but there doesn't seem to be much dispute that it's extremely rare. There are also cases where a baby can get hepatitis B from the mother, but the official medical statistics from the US are that it's 1,000 babies are born a year with hepatitis B out of about 6 million. So that is 0.0167. That doesn't mean it doesn't matter. If it's your child, it matters. But what it does mean is that you're talking about something that most parents do not have any fear of their child contracting. So if they decline to have them vaccinated for this virus at birth, that would seem pretty reasonable. That would make a whole lot of sense. On the other hand, if they don't want to decline it, they have the right to do that too. Okay, so what are we talking about here? Well, going back to this communication that Aaron Siri believes he got from an employee at Kaiser. This, I'm reminding you again, is standard communication and scripting for newborn medications at birth. They say they'd like to take a moment to align our approach. So we want everybody to be singing from the same hymn sheet. And this is how they introduce and administer routine, they call this a routine newborn medication at birth, including the hepatitis B vaccine. Well, I'm going to continue reading. These medications are part of our standard of care and play a critical role in protecting our newborns from preventable complications. How we present this information to families is very important and can significantly influence acceptance. Key exceptions: present these medications as routine and standard care. Routine and standard care. Why? When 1,000 babies out of 6 million a year are born with hepatitis B, why does this have to be routine and standard care? Who benefits most from that? I mean, there's an obvious financial benefit there, but why are we doing this? Now, you might say, well, does it hurt the child? If it doesn't hurt the child, what does it matter? That's a whole nother conversation, and you can look it up. We did some research into it, and I'm sure it's no surprise to anyone listening to this that adverse effects from vaccines are very controversial. They're very complex. They typically involve autoimmune conditions, and hepatitis B vaccine is no exception. And we're going to save that conversation for another time, because the point here is the principle. The principle of informed consent is not, well, you can only have informed consent if it's bad for you or might be bad for you, or we agree it could be bad for you. No, the principle is you have that right to say no anytime you want to, if you so choose. So, going on, they say use clear, confident, and consistent language. Okay, fine. But then they tell you what that is. Avoid framing as optional unless parents specifically express hesitation. So what are they saying there? Well, they're trying to tell you they don't want you to know it's optional. They're taking advantage of the parents who go into that hospital and don't know that they have a choice. That bothers me so much. That makes me so angry, because it's always the most vulnerable. They say they care about the vulnerable. They say they care about the underserved communities. They say they care most about the people with the least access to healthcare, the people with the least access to stand up for themselves. And yet it's always the people with the least access to stand up for themselves who get targeted every single time. And it's right there. Those who don't know that they have the right to informed consent. Be prepared to briefly explain the benefits and purpose of each. Okay, nothing there about explaining any potential adverse effects, only the benefits and the purpose of each. Suggested script for staff. As part of our routine newborn care, we will be giving your baby 3 important medications. This includes a vitamin K injection to prevent serious bleeding, an eye ointment to protect against infection, and the hepatitis B vaccine to help protect your baby from serious illness. Okay, 1,000 out of 6 million babies get that illness. Unbelievable. These are standard for all newborns and help keep your baby safe and healthy. These are standard for all newborns and help keep your baby safe and healthy. Do they? Do they keep your baby safe and healthy? And why are they standard? And who decided that? And how much money are they making from that? If parents have questions or hesitate, you can add, these medications have been safely used for many years and are strongly recommended because they prevent serious complications that can occur in newborns. We want to make sure your baby has the best protection right from the start. So, okay, they're presenting themselves as people who care very much about the safety of your child. Just to remind you, let's remind you, these medications have been safely used for many years. Well, we don't really know, do we? Because if you go to the vaccine VAERS, the adverse effects, right? That data has been suppressed for so long, right? And a real honest conversation about exactly what the benefits of vaccines are and what's in these vaccines and how much they've hurt our kids. All of those conversations have been suppressed. And go back to my episode with Sherry Tenpenny, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, or my episode with Del Bigtree from the High Wire, or watch Del's show or Sherry's show, right? And we all know, go to RFK Jr. We know what they've done about that conversation. But let's just go back here to this part. They're strongly recommended because they prevent serious complications that can occur in newborns. Serious complications with Hep B that can occur in 1,000 out of 6 million. 0.0167%. Going on this email, the additional reminders that are on here: provide education in a calm and reassuring manner. Okay, that's fair enough. Allow time for questions while maintaining confidence in recommendations. Okay, sure, that's fair. Escalate to the neonatologist if parents are declining or require further discussion. Okay, so if they don't want it, they've got somebody on standby to convince you that you need it, right? Especially intimidating for people who are not used to being in these situations, or maybe don't know a lot about this and don't know a lot about their rights. And then reinforce that this is, and this is in bold, routine evidence-based care. What evidence exactly? That's the question that every parent has a right to ask. You know what it's like if you're having a baby. Is this the conversation that you want to be having? Is this the only thing on your mind, especially if it's your first baby? And again, the evidence on routine standard, i.e. everybody does it, so you have to do it. Guilting a new mom into doing something that really is not, shouldn't be routine. But we haven't even had that conversation. Our goal is to ensure families feel informed and supported, while also reinforcing evidence-based practices that keep our newborns safe. Again, right? We don't know that they keep our newborns safe. Thank you for your continued dedication to excellent patient and family care. Best regards. Now, very important, I've been pretty hard here on Kaiser. And so I feel it's important that you hear immediately their response to our producer, Allison. They asked for a little extra time. Actually, they were very responsive, and they were very pleasant to deal with. This is their statement, Kaiser Permanente statement. We're not aware that this screenshot is from Kaiser Permanente, and it does not reflect our approach to prenatal education or pediatric vaccinations. Kaiser Permanente physicians and care teams educate expectant parents during the 3rd trimester about newborn care after delivery, including recommended medications such as vitamin K, erythromycin eye ointment, and the hepatitis B vaccinations, as well as routine newborn screening tests. This information is discussed as part of standard prenatal care. Their preferences are documented in patients' birth preference plans. Childbirth is one of life's most meaningful moments, and for many families, can also bring understandable questions or concerns. Our care teams work closely with expectant parents throughout their pregnancy and childbirth to build trust, listen carefully, and address their preferences and concerns, so families feel informed, supported, and can focus on welcoming their new baby. So as always, we're not here to convince you of who's right. I can't tell you for 100% certainty that email came from an employee of Kaiser. I haven't met that person. Aaron Siri hasn't met that person. They've communicated before. He has other reasons to believe in their credibility. He also emphasized to me again that this is consistent with the type of scripting and advice and approach that they have, ICAN network has found in many hospitals, not just where it concerns or relates to Kaiser. They have settled a number of suits already, and they have hundreds of letters of demand that they have sent out. It's up to you to decide what it is that you believe. It's up to you to decide where you think what you think is most credible. Perhaps, just personally, what I could say is the most important thing I've learned in reporting on this is that it's up to you as a parent. It's up to you even as a pet owner, because our animals get vaccinated. It's our elderly get vaccinated. There's a vaccine for just about everything under the sun these days. When we watch TV, half the time you're seeing commercials for vaccines. You don't even really know what the vaccine is for. There are so many vaccine commercials. And The one thing that I do know above everything else is that we haven't asked enough questions. And when Dr. Sherry Tenpenny came on the show, I was horrified as a mother, and I really regretted that I didn't ask more questions myself for my own children. So we can't take those decisions back. There's nothing that we can do about it. I didn't vaccinate it during COVID, and from then on, my children never got another vaccine. You may not be in that position, or you may be pregnant. You may have a newborn that's just about to enter the world. All I can say to you is that it's worth taking a listen, once again, to our episode with Aaron Siri. This is a man who has his own children, most of them born at home, because after the first one, he was horrified by what he learned and discovered, and because informed consent is so important to him personally and professionally. And I want to tell you, there's a book that Aaron recommended to me. It's called The Thinking Woman's Guide to Pregnancy. Now, with any book, you don't know, you're reading this, how do they know this? Can you trust it? Can you rely on it? Aaron told me that what he did when he read that book as an attorney, he looked up most of the sources and in the reference documents, and he read the original documents, many of them. And so he has a personal high degree of confidence in that book. I'll repeat the title, The Thinking Woman's Guide to Pregnancy. I'm starting to learn about things I didn't ever really think about. That, when they cut the umbilical cord, how much blood from the mother to the baby, that these things actually matter. And if you start to look at maternal mortality rates around the world, and you look at how we treat childbirth in America, these are very serious things, and they have lasting consequences. And so to do them blindly or to do them unknowingly is kind of reckless. I was kind of reckless. And so this, I think, matters. And if you have the chance not to be, take it. That's what I would say. That's my personal note. Just take it. And so what I want to leave you with now is I want to leave you with Aaron Siri in our very first interview with him when he came on Going Rogue, one of the nicest people I have ever met. And you can look on his X feed. You can go to ICAN's website. We've provided these documents along with the show, so you can look all of them up. But when I was looking at his X account, I was struck by a quote that he chose to put on there, and it was from another good man who is fighting for all of our children. And his name is very familiar to Americans. It's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Robert F. Kennedy, RFK Jr. And he said, this is the quote that I want to leave you with. There is divine worth in every person, and it shines most brightly in our children. This worth commands us to protect children. We must stop poisoning our kids. Thank you to the people at ICAN. Thank you to so many of you who are out there who are fighting this issue. My friend Alex Mayer and all the others who are at the forefront of this. I know that it's thankless work much of the time, but it does mean a lot to so many of us. Welcome to this week's episode of Going Rogue with Lara Logan. If you've been following the show, you have a pretty good idea at this point that where I stand with regard to vaccines and the vaccine injured and medical choice. And so my guest today is someone who knows a lot about this from a data point of view. You don't have to spend very long watching attorney Aaron Siri without realizing that he was that kid in class that always beat you on every test and every exam. And he has put his talents to great use on behalf of the American public. Aaron is a civil rights attorney who works for an amazing firm, Siri and Glimstad. They are all over the country. Half of their work is vaccine related, whether it's vaccine injured or it's just people who have been discriminated against because they chose not to take the vaccine or don't want to take the vaccine. The other half of the company works on, so I'm going to get this wrong, Aaron, but you can correct me. It's on behalf of plaintiffs, right? In regard to things like data breaches, privacy cases, biometric privacy, genetic privacy, fair credit reports. I mean, all the things that really affect many people out there today, more and more so, right? With more vaccines, more digital surveillance, and so on. You've chosen two issues that are going to keep you gainfully employed for as long as possible.
Well, certainly on the plaintiff side, the class action side. I don't know if the vaccine stuff is going to keep me gainfully employed, though.
Yeah, that's not where the money comes from, fighting that entire industry.
Well, I can't fight the industry. If I could sue the vaccine manufacturers, there'd probably actually be some money in that side of it. Most of that work.
That's a very good point.
Can't sue them. We could sue for the silliest violations of all stripes. Congress, made it a $500 penalty if you call somebody's cell phone to market to them. Like that was the worst crime in the world. But yet, if your child is killed or injured by a vaccine, you can never sue the company that did that on the basis they could have made the product safer. So no, there's not a whole lot of money in that work. That's mostly around civil individual rights on the vaccine side. On our plaintiff side class action practice, that is about vindicating consumers who are injured, whether it's from privacy violation of all stripes and so forth. Okay, so we've had Del Bigtree on the show before, spent a lifetime fighting vaccine mandates and trying to push Big Pharma, to be honest, about the safety issues around vaccines. We also had Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, huge numbers from our audience. This is an issue that not only affects everybody, it interests people. People want the truth. That's how I read it. People really want the truth. And what's interesting to me about you, what sort of sets you apart from Del and Sherry, is that in your work as an attorney, you have a very analytical, data-driven approach to a lot of what you do because you're going into a courtroom, right, fighting this. And so you very much have to be, your success depends on the success of the evidence beneath your feet, right? What you're bringing. And so that, I think, provides it provides a much needed piece of this whole puzzle. And I know that you've been doing this for more than a decade now. I know that your firm has more than 100 cases, vaccine. We have more than 100 people at the professionals at the firm. In terms of cases, we probably have collectively thousands of cases.
Thousands of cases, of many of whom are vaccine injured?
Almost. We have actually, I happen to know the number because from yesterday, we have 492 pending cases. And they're not cases, they're more claims with the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program on behalf of folks who have been seriously injured by vaccines. That does not include COVID vaccine.
So you would think, right, the system you're talking about is VAERS, right? That was set up for vaccine injured?
So VAERS is a reporting system where you can report that you've been injured. And it's set up to make sure they never get a report because it takes an hour. What doctor has an hour essentially to do it. But there's something separate than VAERS. When Congress eliminated the ability for consumers, for families to bring those claims in 1986 under the National Child Vaccine Injury Act, it left a void because normally you would hold the company accountable. Instead, it set up a program called the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. It is in the Federal Court of Claims in Washington, D.C. And if you're injured by a vaccine, you can bring a claim in that program, but you bring it again the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. That is the federal health department in which the CDC, FDA, NIH, all the agencies are located. So that's who you're bringing a claim against.
And why do you need an attorney to do that? I mean, I'm just thinking about, all the people out there who may have their children who've been vaccine injured and have a real case, but don't have access to an attorney or the money for that.
Well, because despite claims that this is supposed to be an easier, simpler, less adversarial process to obtain compensation. It's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly adversarial process in which you fight against a little law firm. They're called the Department of Justice. You might have heard of them. Okay.
The little law firm.
Yeah, little law firm called the Department of Justice. They also happen to have all our money.
Yeah.
So they take our money to fight against who? To fight against the industry that harms the citizens? No. To defend the interests of the corporations against families whose kids and sometimes the adults have been injured or killed by these products. And, in a typical courtroom setting, if we bring a case, first of all, we could send, a notice to the insurance carrier and they'll often settle. And if we have to bring a case, the other side has 30, maybe they'll get an extension of 45 days to respond, and you go into litigation. In this program, you can't even bring a claim unless your injury has lasted at least 6 months, no matter how bad it is, unless you've had surgery or you've died. Okay, so even if you're a truck driver, let's say, and you get, some kind of injury that, doesn't fall on what they call the table, which are most injuries, and you can't use your arm anymore, right, from the vaccine.
So you can't do your job.
You can't do your job. You still got to wait 6 months. You can even file a claim. And then when we have to file a claim, we have to collect all your medical records, no matter what they're for 3 years prior, and submit it. So that takes time. Then we finally submitted all of that. Then the Department of Justice often gets 9 to 12 months just to respond.
Wow.
In what court, in what defendant ever gets that? No, never. No such thing. I represented big corporations for years before I opened my own law firm. There's no such a thing, okay? Then, when they finally have to respond, is it like, okay, we're going to fairly because now we're 2 years down the road? No.
Yeah.
Now the fighting just begins. And the whole tactic that the Department of Justice has is to bleed out the petitioners.
Of course.
Drag it on as long as possible and bleed out the attorneys, because the attorneys, they don't even get a contingency. They don't get paid. They don't get paid until the very end from the worst statutory rates in the nation. And so the whole objective is to bleed out the petitioners and the attorneys. And you know how you normally prove a drug injured you? You get discovery. You get the documents from the company, and you get to depose the people in the company. You don't get to do that. So you don't get any discovery. You don't get to depose anybody. You don't get any documents. They get all your clients' medical records, and you have to prove causation in a system where the special masters, you don't get an Article III judge, are constantly attacking the lawyers, and they attacked any experts you bring about vaccines often, viciously, and most people don't want to be experts anyway. So the whole system is not set up to fairly compensate.
No, it's rigged. Folks. The system is rigged. Is that fair?
It is. You have a system where you have empowered the federal government to fight against everyday Americans who are injured by consumers, and the Department of Justice has good lawyers, and the federal government are not stupid. So they just basically modify the system, or use your words, rig it, to make sure they win. After the law was passed, there's a lot of the rules of the system of this program are set up by the actual federal government. So in some ways, yes, they've rigged the system against petitioners. So
what are the, if you can get compensation,
yes,
how do they put a dollar amount on that? I mean, how much do you get for a dead child?
So they cap stat damages at $250,000 for death. $250,000, that's the cap. And for pain and suffering, where often is where you get most of your relief, it's capped at $250,000 too. So those are capped. So your damages are capped. You can't get discovery. You fight against the DOJ. They spend all our money to get the best experts. You as the petitioner have to almost always still prove causation, and yet somehow you don't get a jury. This is not a court really system. This is more of a policy program in which they're really only willing to compensate certain limited harms, like Guillain-Barré syndrome. The kind of harms which is basically your immune system attacking your nerve endings, usually starts in your peripheries, your toes, your fingers, travels up and can lead to paralysis, sometimes temporary, sometimes permanent. Transverse myelitis, which is basically, your nervous system attacking your spinal column. A whole host of stuff like that. They're usually neurological or immune-mediated neurological disorders. And the problem is, in particular, is that the whole trade-off here was, okay, you're going to give up your right to a jury.
Yeah.
You're going to give up your right to discovery. You're going to give up your right to actually get real compensation for a fast, speedy way process. And instead, you got the opposite.
That was meant to be the bargain, right?
That was the bargain in 86. And that's why Congress set up this system in 86 when they gave the immunity as a way to fairly and quickly compensate. It's anything but fair and quick.
Wow. It's really quite disturbing when you look at it. You know, most of us are going about our lives. I vaccinated my kids when they were babies, when they were born and as they went through the school system. But one of my children was diagnosed with a condition that I was told is autoimmune and genetic, POTS, posterior orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. Mm-hmm. So if I didn't realize at the time that this was could be vaccine related. Is there a statute of limitations?
Yes. So the program, but I should mention, the program has paid out over $5 billion to get, even despite all those issues. There is a statute of limitations. It's 3 years. Oh. Now, unlike any other law in this country, any other state, minors, their statute of limitations are told until they're 18. Not in this program. So if you're injured at a baby and you're 3 years old, your SOL, your statute of limitations, can expire. I will tell you probably most of the calls we get, the statute of limitations is already expired. It's too late. Because by the time the parents connect it, because who's going to tell them? The doctor's going to tell them? No. The medical community tell them? No. Who's going to tell them? By the time they finally connect that the injury resulting from the vaccine, it's often too late. So yes, there is a statute of limitations issue. I'll tell you one other interesting case that was once filed around this issue. Maybe interesting to me. I hope you find it interesting. It is under the statute, our federal government is supposed to promote the existence of this program, okay? Because how else are you going to know about it?
Right.
So somebody who somebody who brought a lawsuit against the Secretary of HHS and said, hey, you're not promoting it and I didn't know about it. Huh. You know what the court said?
What?
Well, you know about it now, so you don't have standing. Dismiss the case.
You have to be kidding.
So obviously the federal government with impunity can never promote it, and they don't properly promote it. This is why they don't know. In fact, most lawyers don't know about this program. And most lawyers don't even bother engaging and bringing these cases because, like I said, they are, if you want to make money as a lawyer, these are not the case to bring. You by the time you bring the case and settle it, usually the time horizon is years and years before, and you just don't, and unlike, your typical med mal case or personal injury case where the lawyers get a percentage, like I said, they get these statutory rates where, under very stringent rules that aren't very good. So it's a very hard practice to maintain profitably.
So you're not doing it for the money. So why are you doing it?
Specifically the vaccine injury compensation program?
Yeah.
These folks need representation. And I'll tell you, if your child dies or gets injured by a vaccine, the reality is that money only goes so far as a consolation. It doesn't go very far.
No, it doesn't.
You're not getting, the money doesn't.
It doesn't come close.
It doesn't.
No.
But the thing about the folks who are injured by vaccines, if you go to your doctor and you say, look, my child was exposed to this chemical compound, was even exposed to this drug product, was exposed to, you name it, and started, had a fever, high-pitched scream, what seemed like encephalitis, brain swelling, and now all of a sudden has these issues. The doctor will be like, okay, let's take a look at that. You go in and say that the cause was potentially a vaccine, and how do you think you get treated? You don't get treated well.
They don't want you there.
They don't treat you well even, oftentimes. I'm not saying all doctors. To be sure, there are some incredible doctors out there. But I will tell you, a lot of these folks who come to us, what we find, because we have to get their medical records, we'll have to find nasty notes almost in their medical records about, says it's about, relates it to vaccination. And so you have a group where, imagine your child has now been injured. And remember, because people always say to me, well, the people who call your firm about vaccine injuries, they're anti-vaxxers. And I'm like,
how can they be anti-vaxxers? They vaccinated their child.
Exactly. The anti-vaxxers don't call, the anti-vaxxers, whatever that means, they don't call my firm because they don't get the vaccines. These are folks who vaccinated. So they get the vaccine. They did what they're supposed to do. Their child is injured. Before I continue the story, I'll one other segue. People also often say to me, well, if vaccines cause injury, I'll know it. I'd know it. And I'd say, really? Tell me the last 3 drugs that just came off the market, because drugs come off the market all the time. And tell me what injuries they caused. Oh, you don't know, do you? You know why you don't know? Because it didn't happen to you, and be thankful. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen, okay? And vaccines won't come off the market because you can't see the manufacturers, but let's put that aside. So you have a family, kids seriously injured by a vaccine, right? Their doctors are gaslighting them. Yeah. And then how are they talked about on the news, especially before COVID?
Oh, please.
What group can you talk about in America the way they talk about people who don't vaccinate? Can you imagine? Replace what I'm about to say with any minority, any religious, any ethnic group. You ready for it? Throw them out of school. Throw them out of their jobs. They're selfish.
Don't treat them at the ER.
Don't treat them. Let them die. They deserve it. Who can you talk to about like that?
White people. But you said minority.
Well, they're on their way to being a minority. But,
on the way, yeah.
But separate issue. But with these folks.
Yeah, your point is that you can say, you can denigrate and say anything you want about people who don't take vaccines because they've created this standard that everybody has to do it or you're putting other people at risk. Therefore, your choice is a selfish, harmful choice.
Well, I'll address that too. But before I do, I'll just piece that together with your question, which is these folks then call our firm. The money oftentimes is not even what we give them. What we give them is somebody who will listen to them, believe them, and fight for them. I often feel like that is worth more than any dollars we end up getting them, right? Because, it's not like they're part of some vaccine-injured community. They're just families scattered haphazardly across this country. They come from any racial, ethnic, religious, geographic, you name it. There's no common theme, right? Vaccines are in that way very pluralistic. They're an equal opportunity injurer, right? They can injure anybody. In many ways, it's a shot in the dark. With that said, I do think that's a big part of the service we do provide, and not meaning to, but I think that it is a part of why to do it. Now, in terms of what you're saying, protect the community, most vaccines don't even stop transmission. In fact, some vaccines increase your likelihood of transmitting the underlying pathogen because they do reduce symptoms.
And then you don't know that you have it and you're passing it on.
That's right.
Okay, so that was a very interesting answer. But one of the most interesting things about it is that you didn't answer me.
Oh, tell me. What did I answer? I'm so sorry.
Why do you do it?
Oh, I thought I did.
Not just you as the lawyer, but you as the person. What does it mean to you?
So what I just said to you about folks who are, how people who don't vaccinate are treated, the same question you're asking me right now, I was asked in a hallway after a hearing in New York City. New York City, you're going to get another story. New York City decided that there were 3 zip codes in which you cannot live if you did not get a measles vaccine, because there was a measles outbreak. Okay, there were cases of measles, which they define as 1 case of measles, right? So,
an outbreak is 1 case.
Yeah, which nobody died, in which there were thousands of parties, and this was in a religious Jewish community where they will not get this product. Every single vial of the MMR vaccine has literally billions of pieces of human DNA from the cultured cell line of aborted fetus. So you're injecting into a child billions of pieces, because viruses only grow in cells. That's how they grow.
Yeah.
So if you want to make
you
virus...
need live culture.
Right. And they have found that the most effective way to grow rubella virus in particular is on human cells. So they use the cultured cell line of aborted fetus to grow that. Yeah. And when they try, you can't filter that out.
That makes me want to vomit. A billion pieces.
So these folks don't want to get this product, okay? So
I don't want to get that product.
And so a lot of people have religious objections to that, and we're founded in a country of respecting people's religious beliefs. And so the only way that these communities could get their children back in school is to have for their kids to actually get measles. And as the New York City Health Commissioner said, please stop having measles parties, because they were.
Well, that's what we grew up with. Measles parties, chickenpox parties, mumps parties. That's what our parents did. So-and-so's got chickenpox. Pack your bag, kids. We're going to visit. You're spending the night. That's how it was done.
So they were having these massive parties. Thousands of kids were getting measles. And so New York City decided they were just going to make it illegal for you to have measles, to not get the vaccine, excuse me. And so they were issuing violations, literally just showing up at your door, banging on the door. And if you weren't in their system as having had it, your kid didn't have it, or you did not have it, they were just giving you a violation just for existing on this planet in one of these zip codes, living in your own home. So ICAN, Informed Consent Action Network, actually supported our firm to represent
Informed Consent Action Network, ICAN.
ICANDecide.org, to represent anybody that got these violations. So hundreds of these violations came to our firm. We got almost all of them dismissed, almost all technical reasons. You served it too late, you served it too early, you served it up, you served whatever. We got almost all of them done, except for about 20 that we couldn't get dismissed basically procedurally. We had to fight substantively. So we go down to this hearing. I'm going to get to the answer to your question.
No, take your time. I'm enjoying the journey.
So we go down to this hearing, and the chief legal officer of the New York City Department of Health, he is defending the New York City Health Department's violations, and I am, there seeking to strike them down. And so at that point, this was a long time ago now. But before I continue, I just want to reiterate: no children died. Okay, out of thousands of cases. Mm-hmm. And I know, by the way, they reported 2 children died of measles in Texas recently. We represent one of those families. That child did not die of measles. We have all the medical records. When they tell you in the news he died of measles, that's not true, okay? The other child we don't represent, but a different doctor had reviewed medical records, and he came out and wrote a report and said that also wasn't from measles, by the way. I'm not saying measles cannot cause harm. It can. But I'm saying that wasn't true.
Yeah.
Anyways, going back to New York City. So we're in the hallway, and this was really early on. So at this point, I'm still actually even representing some big corporations. Mm-hmm. I did mostly commercial lit before I did this.
And you're how old at this point?
Let's see. Okay. So I am late 30s, I think.
And what is the year?
So 2017. So maybe I just turned 40, early 40s. Late 30s. So I'll leave it at that. Anyway, and he's like, why are you doing this? Just like you're asking me. He goes, why are you doing this? Because I don't understand. Because my firm at that point was still we weren't even doing plaintiff side class actions. We were doing commercial litigation. So like we were representing some public traded companies even with big cases. Because when I left the big firm I worked at, we would still get cases, because we still brought that kind of pedigree in any event.
He looks at you and says, why are you doing this?
I went to Berkeley for law school. You clerked for the chief judge of the Supreme Court of Israel for a year. You worked at, one of the most prestigious firms in the country representing huge corporations. And then you opened my own firm, and I was still doing that, but at a smaller set of multi-billion-dollar disputes. We had, a few $100 million disputes, a few $1 million disputes. And I told him the same thing I told you. I said, look, what group can you treat the way that they treat people who don't vaccinate? Really, I mean it.
Yeah.
And I don't know of any other firm that really, in scale, seeks to represent that group. You want to get a vaccine? Great. This is America. That's freedom. Get as many as you want. Genuinely, I would support your right to do that. We do all kinds of things that have risks, have benefits, whatever. You're free to do it. I would support anybody's right to get a vaccine every day, wear 16 masks, and live in their basement on a self-imposed stay-at-home order forever. They should be free to do that. But at the same token, nobody should ever be coerced to get these products if they don't want to, whether it's because of the aborted fetal cell line stuff in each of them, or one or another reason. Maybe because they're older, one of their kids already died from a vaccine or was seriously injured.
Yeah, can you imagine?
And they don't want to vaccinate the rest of their kids. And now they're saying their kid can't go to school if they don't get the product. So yeah, I mean, if
so, it's the injustice.
It's the injustice, and more critically, it's the incredible injustice. I mean, some of these families, it is when you literally I've got one family where the child died of a vaccine and the other kids were going to be kicked out of school unless they vaccinated. Think about that. Could you imagine? Or this is often the case that one child is already injured and that very kid is going to be kicked out of school.
It's outrageous.
It is incredibly
so
outrageous.
You have a child who's injured from vaccines and they want you to keep vaccinating them.
Oh, go to California. Right now in California, you can't get an exemption to a vaccine under any circumstances, pretty much, except for the most narrowest reasons that have to be approved by the government because they have your best interest at heart.
Yeah, sure. We see that over and over.
Yeah.
It's funny because I just did an event for Freedom Now Foundation out of California who works on this exact issue. And they were talking about, how they technically you can get an exemption in California, but all the myriad of ways they make sure that you can never exercise that right.
You cannot get an exemption in California right now, pretty much.
No, effectively you cannot.
You cannot. They eliminated the non-medical exemption in 2014-15. And then the medical exemption, they curtailed to basically a government process. And if you're a doctor and you give too many, they actually come and basically
you're not allowed to give more than 5. If you're a doctor and you give more than 5 exemptions to any of your patients, your license can be taken away from you.
Yeah, because you are violating the orthodoxy that vaccine injury is rare. And if you don't stick with that, who needs a medical exemption? Typically, it's kids who've already been injured by vaccines.
Yes.
We represent tons of them. We represent the folks who need exemptions. They always talk about these kids who, you got to protect the people who can't vaccinate. Yeah, those are typically vaccine injured people. That's who that they are. And trust me, they don't have an issue with folks not getting vaccines typically. I vaccinated my children all through their lives. Yeah.
It was only until COVID that I started to realize, wait a minute, and to your point about how long it takes you and the statute of limitations is we went through 40 million doctors. I mean, tests for this, tests for that. It's very difficult to figure out what's wrong with your child. I mean, unless, I'm sure even if your child collapses, but in the case, what we were dealing with without getting into too many personal details, it took years to get a diagnosis.
You know who a lot of our clients are who are adults who are injured by vaccines? Medical professionals.
Yes.
My very first POTS case that I did, and we have lots of POTS cases, my very first POTS case was on behalf of a nurse who got POTS after a flu shot. Why does she didn't blow the statute of limitations. Why? Because she connected the product, the vaccine, with the injury. And a lot of doctors, nurses, medical professionals, they do. They're like, ooh, where did this neuropathy come from? Where did this dysautonomia come from? And they'll connect to the vaccine. But often, folks who are medical professionals won't. And they will, like you said, blow, because you're just relying on the medical professionals. And rare as a doctor is going to tell you, oh, yeah, I think your POTS was caused by a flu shot or by a Gardasil. Oftentimes, it's HPV vaccines that can cause it.
It's interesting how God works, because along the way here, I worked with a great producer, lovely man. And I had never really known anyone who had children injured by vaccines. I just hadn't encountered that very much. And he and his wife had a son who I think is 80% disabled. And he's grown up now. But, we had this very interesting conversation about medical marijuana. And this is how I discovered it, because he was like, well, I'm in favor of it, partly because his son, what he's been through, and this was such a big benefit and relief to him. And that was when I really started to think about vaccine injuries. This is years before COVID. I really started to think about that. And obviously knowing Del Bigtree, looking at Del, like he shows up in New York and he films the so-called hearings held by the FDA and other medical bodies where they're supposed to be listening to, all the studies and all the science and all the evidence and making an informed decision. And most of the time there's nobody there. They don't even show up, and they're just rubber stamping these things. And Del Bigtree became public enemy number 1. They savaged him because how dare you not say a word?
Yeah.
Just film the process.
Yeah.
Make the process publicly available to everyone in the country. That's a conspiracy? That's not a conspiracy. So and I've listened to some of the testimony that you've given. A couple of things that struck me. Number one is, the depth and breadth of your detailed knowledge, because you have looked at so many studies, so many vaccines, so many adverse effects. And so one of my first questions to you is, when it comes, I know you like the graphs, right? So let's talk about what has happened to the vaccine schedule, because I think some of the reason that people around the world have a hard time believing this or think that it's a conspiracy is that they don't have the same vaccine schedule in other parts of the world. And then the other reason people have a hard time understanding this is that when they had their kids or when they were growing up, we didn't have the vaccine schedule that exists today.
Yeah, it did not exist. So a child in the United States in 1986, following the CDC schedule, would have gotten 3 injections by their first birthday. A child following the CDC schedule today would receive 29 injections, including COVID vaccine, by their first birthday. If you take out COVID vaccine, including in utero, it would be 25 injections. Because
what do you mean in utero?
Meaning when the mother's pregnant. So a pregnant woman right now is supposed to get Tdap, flu shot, RSV, and COVID vaccine, 4 injections. So if you count those 4, you're at 29. If I take COVID out, it's 1 in pregnancy. It takes 3 doses, by the way, for a baby of Pfizer. They give them 3 shots at 7 months, 8 months, and 9 months.
For COVID?
Yes.
Babies don't even get COVID.
So let's get rid of COVID. We've gone from 3 to 25 injections. It's a huge differential. Data point number 2, you're right, other countries. Denmark, for example, has 9 less vaccines on their schedule than the United States. I'll give you another data point. Chronic disease in the United States in the early 80s, according to many data, was under 10% among kids. Today, it's over 40%. Some data shows over 50%, and often multiple chronic health conditions. And most of those chronic health conditions are ones that have an immune system dysregulation etiology. They're based on something in your immune system going wrong. Asthma, that's something going wrong with your immune system. Atopic issues. Even things like ADHD, which people don't think about. When you look at the the markers that have changed in those of ADHD, they're some kind of immune system dysregulation. You go down the list. Vaccines are, to be sure, not the only environmental insult that can cause disease, that can cause something to go wrong. There's forever chemicals. There's all kinds of stuff. We litigate a lot of that other stuff. But when you look at what chronic diseases have exploded, many of them, in fact, most of them, are some form of immune system dysregulation. And so what has caused the immune system of our children en masse to go dysregulate from the early 80s to now?
Yes.
Well, I have may seem a wild suggestion. Maybe start with the very product you now inject over and over and over again, specifically to modify the immune system. They tell you vaccines are a powerful pharma product. They can modify your immune system and give you from your toes to your earlobe systemically, right? And so if they can do A, maybe they can do B. And they can't tell you why we've had this rise in chronic disease. They've studied it. They spent billions of dollars. Maybe because they're not looking at the one thing that they should also be looking at, which is the very thing that modifies your immune system. And I can tell you, the studies that have been done that compare children with no vaccines to the children that had 1 or more vaccines, and there's a whole series of them. Now, a lot of them are smaller. They're all retrospective. They're epidemiological studies, which meaning they're always subject to confounders, okay? So, I could level criticism about those kind of studies. Anybody can.
Yeah.
But they're consistent. They all show that the children who are vaccinated have multiple times the rate of these chronic health conditions compared to children who have no vaccines. And that is terribly disturbing. And I'll add one more data point to this, which is this. If vaccines are so safe, why do they need immunity?
Well, yeah, that's the most obvious question of all.
And do they still need it 5 years after they've been on the market? You still don't know? How about 10 years? 15? 20? How many years do you need to know it's safe
right.
before you can lift the immunity? So the Hep B vaccine, it's safe. You hear it's so safe. It's been on the market. There's 2 Hep B vaccines that are given to babies. Recombivac's B and Engerix B, licensed in 86 and 89. You still don't know they're safe today to lift the immunity? You still need that protection? Come on. You have to be a fool to not understand that. Why would a product need immunity for the injuries that it causes if it doesn't cause injuries? Come on.
So this comes back again to the same statement, right? To the same principle, which is that pharmaceutical companies who produce vaccines are allowed to get away with murder because it is for the greater good. They get to say that people who don't take vaccines deserve to die and don't get medical treatment and so on and so on. They get away with saying that because of this principle that it's for the greater good, right? That's the justification.
That's the argument often made.
So, well, talk to me about that.
Okay, well, the argument made is that you need vaccinations to prevent transmission, okay? So if we, but if we go through most of the vaccines on the childhood schedule, let's just stick to the ones required for school. Because if any vaccine should stop transmission, it should be the ones that are required for school. And there's about 5 or 6 core vaccines that are required. I'll go through them quick, I guess. So first one is DTaP, pertussis, diphtheria, tetanus, okay? Tetanus does not stop transmission. It's a toxoid vaccine. It doesn't actually produce any immunity to the underlying bacteria. It only has in the vial a toxin that's sometimes released by the tetanus bacteria, okay? They take formaldehyde, they deactivate it, and that's what they inject you with. So the vaccine is not intended to prevent you from getting infected with the bacteria or for stopping the bacteria from replicating. It's just intended to prevent you from getting sick by a toxin it sometimes releases, okay?
It's outrageous.
It's a toxoid vaccine. Diphtheria vaccine is the same thing. It's a toxoid vaccine. And then there's pertussis vaccine. The pertussis vaccine does not prevent transmission, okay? Pertussis is a bacteria. It replicates in mucosal surfaces, right? Your nasopharynx, your lungs, and so forth. The vaccine is injected into your arm. It does not create any mucosal immunity, IgA antibodies. It creates immunity in your bloodstream, IgG antibodies, but it does not create mucosal immunity. By the way, it's not me saying this. It's the FDA that says this, okay? In a series of studies called the Warfel studies, where the—
How do you spell that?
Warfel, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay? And what happened is that, usually when a pathogen, when there's less of it, let me also say that the vaccine does reduce symptoms. Okay? Now, when a pathogen, there's less and less of it in the community, the inter-epidemic intervals start getting wider and wider and wider until it's gone.
Yeah.
But pertussis, they didn't get wider. And some studies show they got even narrower, as if there was more pertussis pathogen circulating. Well, how could that be? They went from 3 doses, 4 doses, 5. There were 6 doses of, you get it at 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 18 months, 4 years of age, and then at 11 years of age. So you're getting 6 doses of this stuff, right? So these FDA scientists, what they did is they took a group of baboons because they're very similar immunologically to humans because they don't want to, they're not ethically allowed to purposely infect humans. And they took one group that had never had pertussis vaccine, and never had pertussis. One group that had baboons that had pertussis, and one group that were given the acellular pertussis vaccine, okay, the vaccine we use in America. Then they infected all 3 of them. Those that had pertussis, when they stuck the swab up their nose every day, couldn't culture any pertussis. Those that had no pertussis, no vaccine, they were able to culture for about 35 days. Those that were vaccinated, they were able to culture pertussis bacterium for almost 42 days. So they actually were having pertussis in their nasopharynx for longer than if they were just unvaccinated and never had pertussis. So natural immunity, you're good. Vaccine immunity, you're actually more likely to spread. Why? Because you are still carrying the bacteria in nasopharynx. But if you have less symptoms, are you going to stay home in bed?
No.
Where are you going to go?
You're going to go out.
You're going to go out. You're going to go to school. You're going to be in society.
To
but
work.
you don't know. You're going to hold your baby. You're going to kiss the baby. You're going to kiss your friends. You're going to share drinks, right? You're going to continue to engage in the activities that might spread the pertussis bacteria because you don't know you have it. So, and then there did a whole host of studies after that. And in fact, there was a consensus study essentially put out by the world's leading vaccinologists who are paid by Pharma, okay? And this is one of my favorite stories because they put out this paper in which they wrote in their own words. And if you watched that hearing, you heard me read. I read from that paper. They said it, not me, that pertussis vaccine creates no mucosal immunity and has no effect on community immunity, on herd immunity. They wrote that, okay? These are the industry's paid scientists wrote that and the world organizations. And let me tell you why I think they wrote it.
Why? Because it makes no sense.
I'll tell you why they wrote it. They were this close. In my opinion, this is why they wrote it. This close to having a vaccine that was inhaled nasally for pertussis that they believed would create mucosal immunity and hence could not only reduce symptoms, but also prevent transmission. And so for a moment there, it became okay to take issue with the old vaccine to promote the new one. Yes.
Wow.
But in its final stage of trial, it had issues, efficacy issues that they realized it's not going to work out, and it ended up not coming to pass. And I am certain that they very much regret having written that article because I've used it in depositions with some of these very scientists. Okay, and in fact, we even brought lawsuits about that. So when I'll leave it at that. So that's pertussis. So you are more likely to spread it. And here's the other thing. You know the craziest part about it? If you had pertussis, the next time you encounter it, you will have actual immunity. You will not become infected. You will not transmit it. So for a few years at least, you're not giving it to anybody. But if you've had the vaccine, what the studies show is that not only do you remain potentially susceptible to infection and transmitting it once, but to repeatedly doing so, because that initial immune priming, it's called original antigenic sin. The new term is called linked epitope suppression because it sounds nicer, okay? So they changed the term. That initial imprinting is the immune response you're going to then have every time. That defective immune response remains.
Yes.
So you've now had acellular pertussis vaccine. I had pertussis. The pathogen comes. You get infected. I get infected. I don't spread it at all. You become susceptible. You become infected. You can now transmit it for, according to baboons, 42 days. Humans, some period of time, whatever it is. 3 months later, the bacteria comes again. You again can get infected. I'm still protected. You can still get infected again and transmit it again and again and again. Now, here's the thing. Do we kick kids out of school pertussis vaccinated to stop spread? Of course not.
Of course not.
Of course not.
Because we're still operating under the assumption that getting the vaccine prevents it from being spread.
We should never kick them out of school because civil individual rights demand that we not do so, even if they are more likely to spread, which they are.
But here's the way they guilt you into it, right? Because they say if you don't do it, you're putting other people at risk.
Well, under that logic, the pertussis vaccinated children are the ones who are putting others at risk, and they should be removed from school.
But they never admit to that.
Oh no, they've admitted to this principle.
Yes, when they are in a courtroom or in a hearing where you've got them.
Well, in this instance,
right,
it's in
with a gun to their head, basically.
In this instance, it's in the published literature.
Yes.
This instance, it is what they call the science.
But how many parents know that?
Oh, they don't know. Nobody knows.
They have no idea. So essentially, the parent that's submitting their child to be vaccinated, still doing it, believing they're doing, number one, they're helping their child. Number two, this is the right thing to do for all of society because you're protecting other people's children as well as your own. And number three, there's no real harm. If there's any injury, it's an aberration or it's a conspiracy.
Here, because people believe it when it's a lawsuit. So there was this commercial on TV where they depicted a grandmother who didn't get the pertussis vaccine turning into a wolf, eating her grandchild if she didn't get it.
Wow.
So we brought a lawsuit, a class action lawsuit, because it's not a safety issue. It's an efficacy issue in a way.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes. Because they're lying about the efficacy, which then becomes a safety issue.
They said it's a safety issue. We said it's an efficacy issue. We said there's also I don't want to get into legalities of it.
Okay.
Let's just leave leave the niceties of the lawsuit aside. I don't want to talk about the lawsuit. I'll just say this, that, and I write about this in my book. Shortly after you brought that lawsuit, that commercial was gone, taken down everywhere. It was because why? The grandma who gets the shots is more likely to give it to their grandchild because they don't know
that they have it.
Because they're less likely to know they have it, because they're less likely to have symptoms. They're more likely to hold and kiss their baby. Okay, so we've done one of the shots. Next shot on the list. So that's
just one shot.
That's one of them. That's DTaP given at.
And before you go on, by the way, since you mentioned your book, I do want to point out for people, Vaccines, Amen, The Religion of Vaccines, Aaron Siri.
Yes.
This has not been out very long. It's already, New York Times gave you a nod there. New York Slimes, as they call it. Vaccine scientists credit Mr. Siri for drilling into the details of vaccine research. That must have hurt them to say that.
I'm a little, that was from
they hate you.
That was from an article with a giant hit piece they put out about me. So one of the.
That's funny.
Yeah, so I pulled a quote out. I don't know, somebody texted me epic trolling. I guess, I don't know if that's the right terminology for it.
That's really funny because there's nothing that real conspiracy theorists hate more than having the facts or substance brought to a conversation. Because what happens when to conspiracies and lies? They collapse in the presence of the truth.
Well, there's nothing that needs to be censored more than the truth. You know, when you say you don't need to censor things that are false. You don't need to censor stuff that's like just bull crap. You're like, when you go after somebody and you say that person did X, if they didn't really do it, they may not like it, but it's not that. But when you accuse somebody in the government of doing something that's bad, that's true, that's when they need to censor you. That is when censorship really kicks in. It is the tool of bullies, criminals, dictators throughout time immemorial. Every type of government that's become tyrannical, it's censorship. You want to see a government that's about turning against its people? Look at the level of censorship. That's part of what's so scary, right? Well, let's not go into that topic.
That is part of what is very scary right now.
Yes.
Okay, so we were talking about these vaccines that they give to our kids.
All right, I'll do the rest of them quickly. Polio vaccine. The polio vaccine given for the last 25 years exclusively in America since 2000 is called inactivated polio vaccine. It's injected. There was a polio vaccine before that called oral polio vaccine, which could create some intestinal immunity and hence could have an impact on transmission. But that vaccine has been used for the last 25 years. It's been exclusively IPV. IPV only creates immunity in your bloodstream. Again, no mucosal immunity between your mouth and where you go to the bathroom. That's where polio proliferates. Polio spreads through fecal to oral contamination. You have to get, since we're in a more informal setting, poop in somebody's your mouth. That's how you get it. That's how you get polio. So contaminated water, contaminated this and that. So, obviously there's lots of reasons why polio would have declined when you've no longer are eating people's poop and contaminated water and so forth. But putting that aside.
You haven't been to Afghanistan.
I have not been to Afghanistan. I have no
during the war.
I have no intention of going when there's no war either. With that said, no offense to Afghanistan. I like America. With that said, the vaccine does not create any intestinal immunity. It doesn't create any IgA antibodies that create the immunity that you would have in your mucosal surfaces. Again, I'm just a lawyer. That's what the studies show. That's what the CDC says on its own website. Its own website. They say it does not stop transmission. So if you're kicking a child out of school for not getting a polio vaccine anytime in the last 25 years, that makes no sense. In fact, again, the vaccine is supposed to prevent symptoms, reduce symptoms.
Yeah.
So which kid's more likely to go to school and spread polio? The IP vaccinated or not? Okay, that's the next vaccine. And again, this is This is the CDC WHO guidance on this. If polio were to return, everybody, they say, needs to now get the other vaccine, okay? Because IPV doesn't stop transmission. And by the way, and still no polio, still no. Let's just leave that issue aside. Then we have the meningococcal vaccine, but the immunity only lasts for 5 years. And the CDC's own website, as it explains, it probably has no impact on community or herd immunity. It's not that. It's for personal protection. That brings us to the hepatitis B vaccine. Now, hepatitis B vaccine, I don't know what's going on in classrooms in, in some places in California, but typically you are not going to get, hepatitis B is not going to be transmitted in a classroom setting unless you are having some really wild drug and sex parties in the classroom, okay? Because that's typically the way it's transmitted. Promiscuous sex and intravenous drug users. And we actually sent a Freedom of Information Act to the CDC, and we said, can you please provide us any documentation, ever, of a case of hepatitis B occurring in a grade school, elementary school, high school, middle school, or high school setting?
Yeah.
They provided, we have no records to provide you. So they don't even have a documented case.
It's amazing. They won't say that they're on any. They just say we have no records.
Well, because they don't have any records. Well, the Freedom of Information Act is allows us, the public, who pays the government. They work for us.
Yes.
I know they forget that.
Oh, yeah.
But they work for us. We pay their salaries. They take our money. In any other context, if I came to you and said, give me your money, and you said no, and I said, you got to give it anyway, you'd call that something. But they take your money.
Yes,
we
I would.
pay these people. And so our tool to check up on those who work for us is the Freedom of Information Act. Now, that tool does not allow us to ask them questions like, does it stop transmission? It only allows us to get records. So that is the tool we have available.
Right.
But come on, you're the CDC. You don't have a record.
Who does? If you don't have one, who does?
Right. If you don't have it, who does? Okay. So in a school setting, it's never been a case of it transmitted, right? And because it's hard to see how it honestly would happen.
I mean, the truth is kids don't need that vaccine.
Look, I view vaccines as a personal choice. You want to get a vaccine, get a vaccine. Again, I say it again.
I just said you don't need it. I mean, your chances of you contracting hepatitis B as a child
are extraordinarily low. Now, if you are born to a Hep positive mother, that is a different situation. Now, there's a whole host of other things that they do, including immunoglobulins and so forth. And what is the delta between getting all of those medical interventions plus vaccine and getting all of them without vaccine? The data is interesting in that regard, but that's for a different show. That's a whole different, it's a very medical discussion, and you're going to put your audience to sleep. But your typical, your infant to a non-Hep positive mother who's just been born has basically zero risk chance of getting hepatitis B. I mean, it's really hard to envision the scenarios where they would get hepatitis B.
Right.
So with that said, but you were asking about
why do your children need to get it before they're a year old?
Why do they need to get it? I mean, there's really no difference between 6 months and 1 year, again, unless it's a really, again, it's mostly from intravenous drug users. So when they came out with the vaccine in 1981, first vaccine ever, it was made from plasma of chronic hepatitis B carriers. So people who were engaged in high-risk activities, they took their blood, they took out the surface antigens, and then they created the vaccine with it. And a lot of people just didn't want to get that product. They didn't even like the way it was made. But who did they target? It was really only meant for high-risk users. And then when they came out the recombinant DNA technology vaccine, the very first hepatitis B vaccine ever, based on recombinant DNA technology, by the way, in the history of the world, just like we have mRNA vaccines today, this was a brand new technology. And the very first one was a hepatitis B vaccine. Licensed based on a trial for children with 147 kids, 5 days of safety monitoring and no control. Let's just put that fun aside, okay? When they came out with that, they didn't recommend it for all kids, only for the high-risk groups. And then 89 when they came out with Engerix-B, again, only for the high-risk groups. Only in 1991 did the CDC recommend it routinely.
Once they had
immunity. And when you read the report, well...
by 1991, the companies had immunity.
Oh, they had the immunity. That's true, too. Very good point. But when you read the report, their own words for why they went to routine, one of the reasons they gave, one of the central reasons they gave, is they couldn't get the drug users and the sex workers to take the product.
Wow.
It's one of the reasons that they gave. So with that said, but going back to the central point, as you said, they have to do it for community purposes. It's a bloodborne illness. It's not contagious in the same way. So that brings us to the last two products that are typically required for school, which are chickenpox and MMR vaccine. And those two can prevent transmission for a certain duration in most people. And so there's where you have, their argument, really. That's where they'll often plant their flag. But number one, get the product if you want to get it. Who's stopping you? Does your shot not work if I don't get it?
Apparently so. Well, that's what we're taught to believe, is that that everybody has to comply. Just like with a digital currency, for that to work, everybody has to comply. And so what's emerging lately is that vaccines are as much about compliance as they are about health. Because look at how hard and heavy they went against those people who weren't vaccinated against COVID. Where they were saying, the President of the United States came out at the time, Joe Biden, came out and attacked people. They were saying, let them die in the emergency rooms. They deserve it.
It's public, quote unquote, health officials, they only see one thing, and they often...
What is that?
When you look at the CDC and state health agencies, the primary metric they use is vaccine uptake. It's measurable, it's proactive, they can claim success, and often that's the measure of success when it comes to infectious disease. I don't see analyses that look at the total health impact. I'll give you an example. Let's go back to measles. So measles mortality in America declined by 98% between 1900 and 1963 when the very first vaccine was introduced. You know what didn't cause that decline?
What?
The measles vaccine.
How do you know?
Didn't exist.
So what did? Natural immunity?
Well, what causes the decline? Maybe better sanitation, better nutrition, better living conditions, better acute care, meaning public health officials could probably take credit for a lot of that. They never do on those bases. They only point to the vaccine.
Why? The $64 million question.
What I just said, well, that's a big question. I'll just use the answer I gave earlier. It's measurable, and they can claim credit for it a lot more easily. But so you have a 98% decline in mortality from measles between 1900 and the late 50s, early 60s. None of it has to do with the vaccine. By the time the vaccine came out, a few years prior, you had about 400 deaths a year in America. At a time when everybody got measles, it was endemic. Everybody got it. So that came out to 1 in 450,000 Americans dying of measles. Okay? 1 in 450,000 Americans dying of measles. Now, every death is a tragedy. But remember, increasing population from 1900 to 1960s, declining mortality, no vaccine. That trend line would likely continue. It did in England. They didn't introduce the vaccine until 1968 in England and Wales. And they had over a 99% decline in mortality by the time they had vaccine introduced, okay? So likely, even of those 400 deaths, the mortality would likely have continued to decline. That doesn't mean vaccines didn't prevent some deaths. Might have been some. There's lots of diseases they tried to create vaccine for, like scarlet fever. They didn't succeed. Scarlet fever was a massive killer in 1900, one of the biggest killers. Scarlet fever, where is it today? If they had developed a vaccine for scarlet fever, I assure you, I am almost certain.
Have scarlet fever today.
You'd be vaccinating for it, but you still have scarlet fever today.
Yeah.
And they would say everyone will die if you don't get the scarlet fever. And they will say the only reason scarlet fever went away is from the vaccine. Okay, that's what I think would happen. Now, here's the craziest part about the measles thing. 400 deaths. Now, when they look at studies of those who've had measles versus those who don't, and these are very inconvenient to public health establishment, and they're all in PubMed, anybody can read them. Those who have had measles, including mumps, rubella, chickenpox, these febrile child infections, have far lower rates of death from cardiovascular disease and less deaths from cancer. Okay? Not me saying that. That's what the studies show. A 100,000 prospective study of over 20 years in Japan that's followed Japanese people for over 100,000 years.
Yeah.
Japanese government, major universities did the study.
Yeah.
Those that had measles and mumps had a 20% reduction in mortality from cardiovascular disease, statistically significant. 20 years, 20% reduction. 900,000 Americans die of cardiovascular disease in America every year. If having measles and mumps would reduce that by 2%, 1%, our public health benefit of eliminating measles and mumps from this country has already gone upside down. Kids who have had measles have a 66% reduction in Hodgkin's lymphoma and 166% reduction in non-Hodgkin lymphoma. That kills 20,000 people in America a year, many of them children. Again, how many people are dying from cancers and heart disease? What is that increase compared to the maybe 400 lives we saved from measles in America? Okay, what I'm saying is that they don't account for those externalities, and then they rush headlong into COVID. Right? Because you might be upside down from a public health perspective on measles. There might be a reason measles never went away. It's like so many other pathogens over the decades. Maybe it's because having measles conferred a survival advantage. I'm just saying what the data might appear to reflect, right? But that question makes public health officials angry, mad. They don't respond to intellectually. They go, we should really look at that because we could learn from that. Maybe we did mess up and we should think about it the next time around. No, they don't even want to give that any air. They don't even think about it. And the same thing with COVID. They just rushed in giving a vaccine into a pathogen, which they said killed 500,000 people in 2020 when there was no vaccine. 500,000 people. Measles killed 400. Almost everything we vaccinated for killed dozens to a few hundred for the most part before there was a vaccine. COVID is not normal.
Not in
500,000 people dying in 2020 is unlike any other pathogen for which we vaccinate. Have a little humility, like step back before you just rush in with this product and really assess what's going on because you don't know what effect it's going to have on the ecology of that pathogen. Could it take us to a better place, a worse place? Anyways.
Yeah. Okay, so in all these years that you've been working on this, what have you learned?
What have I learned about? Well, I'd say the number one lesson I learned is this, is that for everybody out there who loves vaccines, great. And if you don't like vaccines, fine. You want them, you don't want them. But the most important principle is everybody should be able to choose. Because here's the thing. Even if you love every single vaccine right now, if the day comes that you don't want one or you don't want some other mandated medical product, maybe it's a new kind of mask, maybe it's a new kind of medical intervention. Hey, listen, cardiovascular disease is clogging up our medical systems, Lara. Did you know that?
Yeah.
It is an existential threat. It's clogging up our hospitals, 900,000 people dying a year. We have to mandate statins.
And these people are going to die anyway. Look at their genetics. Their genes show us they're all going to get heart disease. They're just a drain on the system.
Do you remember what they said during COVID? You can't clog up the medical system. We have to delay the spread. You have to get the COVID shot. Otherwise, you're clogging up the medical system, and that causes people to die.
Yeah.
Well, cardiovascular disease causes people to die. So you know what? Everybody's got to get a statin. In fact, everybody should go on some kind of blood thinner right now. Otherwise, you're going to clog the medical system and kill everybody. My point is, you want to make arguments. Most vaccines don't stop transmission, and yet they're mandated. Think about that. It has nothing to do with community immunity.
I thought the whole point of a vaccine was that it stops transmission. I mean, come on, Aaron. What do you mean most vaccines don't stop transmission?
We just went through DTaP, polio, meningococcal, and these are the ones required for school. The ones not required, Forget about it. The point is this. Even if the day comes or you don't want it, and then you can't get a job, and you can't go to school, and you can't go to work, and you can't go to public transportation,
and you can't buy a house,
and you can't engage in civil society, then what rights do you have? And let me tell you, your body is the commodity on which pharma makes its money. The more they can control what you inject, ingest, and put on your body, the more money they can make. It's just good business. I don't even think it's nefarious. It's just the way business works. That's why they spent, well, you can call it nefarious, but it's not a conspiracy is my point.
People die.
It's not a conspiracy. It's just the way the economics of it work, which is where they put their lobbying dollars. That's why they want to eliminate exemptions. That's why they want to have mandates. How great is it to have a product where you have a guaranteed market?
Okay. Aaron, on the one hand, it's a very rational argument, and it's so interesting to hear you make it. But then on the other hand, I'm just going to remind you, they kill people.
Talking about the COVID vaccine?
No, not just the COVID vaccine.
Other vaccines?
Yes, they kill people, and they kill children.
Yes.
And they hurt babies. And they have created a system in which we unknowingly and blindly go to like lambs to the slaughter, and we offer up our kids to the system, and we do it based on deception. We have been deceived into thinking that we're helping our children, and we're hurting them. So when you say it's not nefarious, I understand it's easy to say I'm just here doing my job and not concern myself with the effects. But this is my job, is to point out that there is nothing more nefarious than people who participate in that system. When you kill innocent people and you deceive them, you deceive their parents into thinking that they're doing good. Even those people who think they're getting vaccinated for the public health, for the greater good. Even those people. This entire system where the money is the motivation, which it obviously is. Bill Gates was out there years ago saying vaccines are the best investment he ever made. His return was 10 to 1. I am an African, so forgive me if I take this very personally. I know there'll be people that say I don't have the right color skin. I don't care what they say. In South Sudan, a place I've been, there's no infrastructure for disabled people. Being disabled is a death sentence. And how many kids have been disabled because of Bill Gates' vaccines? How many young girls in Sudan and in India will never have children because they were sterilized as a result? The same Indian parliament that allowed Bill Gates to come in with his COVID vaccines censured him because of the injury and the harm that his vaccines were doing. I'd be hard pressed to find another word for this other than evil. Murderous, evil, self-serving, greed, whatever. Throw anything you want at it. But if you knowingly or intentionally, blinding yourself to it, just continue, you forge ahead regardless. It's the antithesis of what motivates you to do what you do, which is good. It's the good in you that motivates you to take on cases no one else wants, to fight legal battles that last for years, that don't pay very much. It's the good in you. What's driving these people is dark, and it's unforgivable.
On a systemic level, I don't disagree. There are very dark pockets of it. I mean, I just meant a lot. I meant like your typical frontline doctor. They just think they're doing good.
Not good enough. Sorry. Not good enough. You, of all people, are medically qualified to figure this out. I don't want to hear it.
I'm not going to argue about that. I mean,
But how about you agree?
Well, I agree that I don't give a pass to, any doctor. I don't give a pass to medical professionals who don't bother doing their homework. I mean, it doesn't take rocket science to figure out what was relied upon to license a Hep B vaccines, for example, and to say, and then to have to say to your patient, I have to tell you, if I'm giving you truly informed consent, At the least, I have to say to you, these were never properly trialed before they were licensed, and they've never been properly assessed for safety after licensure. That would be the minimum they should do, and they don't do that, obviously.
No, they don't do that. And I asked one of my doctors, I asked him, when I started to ask after COVID, I asked when they said, your children need vaccines, I said, what's in them? That's all I asked, what's in them? And so they brought the ingredients. Well, my husband called me from the pediatrician's office and he said, I said, tell them you want to know what's in the vaccines. And so they gave him, they said to him, the doctor will give you a call. No vaccines today. And so when I talked to the doctor, who was a wonderful doctor, I like him very much, he said, well, you should know that there's a new adjutant in the vaccines. Instead of aluminum, it's supposed to be much safer. I said, what do you mean safer? Like when you gave my children their vaccines before and you told me that they were safe, you didn't tell me that there might be something in the future that's safer, which implies they were not safe.
Yeah, that's right.
To start with.
And what new adjuvant in which vaccine?
It's not aluminum anymore?
Of course it is. Most non-live vaccines are adjuvanted with aluminum adjuvants. So I'm curious to know what he's talking about.
This was a few years ago now, so my kids were like, I don't know, 10, 11, 12.
Yeah. I mean, look, if a 11-year-old girl or boy gets POTS from an HPV vaccine, I mean, first of all, the whole point is to prevent cervical cancer, which you can just engage in normal OBGYN care to avoid that, right? I mean, but in any of, and instead now they're going to have POTS for the rest of their life. I mean, aluminum adjuvants are particularly bad because when you understand them, I mean, they're not like an ionic piece of aluminum when you think of the table of elements, right? Mm-hmm. When you think a tiny little particle of aluminum, if this is a piece of ionic aluminum, this whole city be an aluminum adjuvant. So it's still small in the scale, but it's massive on the micro scale, right? And then when you inject it into animals, and then they sacrifice the animals, they use fluorescence. Where do they find the aluminum adjuvant? Deposits in their organs because you can't excrete them often because they're too big. So they get taken up by macrophages and dendritic cells, and they get deposited, including in the brain. That's what the animal studies show. And actually, Dr. Christopher Exley was he's the world's, I think, the most published. He was at the University of Kiel, scientist on aluminums. Actually, has documented of aluminum being transported through lymphatic vessels into the brains from kids who died young. So it's something to be taken very seriously.
No, it's basically that aluminum that you're putting in your baby, and then your toddler, and then your child, and then your teen, as they grow up, is being stored in the body, and it's building up.
Right, because if I just injected you with pertussis, dead pieces of pertussis, right? So
I don't want dead pieces of anything injected in me.
But if you were,
yes,
right?
If I was, yes.
Little chains of proteins, peptides, and so forth, you have that kind of junk all over your body, right? And so they get picked up by macrophages and whatever, and they just get garbage and thrown away. How do you generate immunity? You have to have cellular death. When cells start dying, that's what creates immunity. So bacteria replicates and causes cellular death. Viruses take over your cells and they cause cellular death. And when that continues, your body goes, danger, danger, cells are dying, right? But if you don't have cellular death, you're not getting an immune response. So they add the aluminum adjuvant into the vial because aluminum is neuro and cytotoxic. Aluminum is bound to silic acid in the soil. For most of human history, we haven't been exposed to aluminum. Your body has a use for magnesium. It has a use for iron. These are all metals. For many metals, your body has a biological purpose.
But not for aluminum.
Zero. Because it's not really something humans are exposed to until humans decide to mine it and separate it from silic acid. And it is toxic to human beings. When you inject that aluminum adjuvant into the arm, it causes carnage. It causes cellular death. Cells start dying. Your body goes, cellular death. Your blood vessels open up. Neutrophils come pouring out, and that's what causes inflammation, right? When you see the red, that's what it is. That's your blood vessels opening, and those immune cells coming out. And then you have these other immune cells, macrophages and dendritic cells. They're like, okay, let's find the bad stuff and take it to the lymph nodes to create immunity, right? Let's go find it. And what do they find? They pick up sometimes you have aluminum alone, you have sometimes antigen alone, so you have aluminum that's connected with the antigens, and those all get picked up. They travel to the lymph nodes. They find a correlate naive B cell that then generates the antibodies that we all know about. But now where do these aluminum-loaded immune cells go? They're too big they can't go through your kidneys.
Especially for babies.
They get, and when they get deposited in the brain, okay?
Yeah.
What happens there? It creates sustained immune activation in those spots because you're having immune response. Like I said, I mean that's not good. You don't want to have aluminum adjuvant in the brain causing a sustained immune response.
No, you really don't. So this is what I think it's fair to say that this is what most people want. They want their children to be safe. Mm-hmm. They want to do the right thing. They want to do the right thing by themselves and by other people. And if you don't want to do those things, starting out, typically you'd have to really be a sociopath not to want those things. Then, of course, as we go forward and we become complicit in something. So now maybe I want to cover up my role in this. Or maybe I get paid a lot of money to do something. And so now I'm kind of trapped in this system. And it's in my interest for the system to keep going because I don't want to be held accountable and I also don't want to lose the money. And so there become lots of self-fulfilling reasons that we continue to participate in a system that is ultimately harmful. But it feels like in no small part, thanks to the work that you've done, the book that you've written, and the work of other people and other doctors to expose this, it feels like we are now sort of on the precipice of exposing that. Correct me where I'm wrong. Number one, very little is done to ensure that vaccines are safety because companies who make them have immunity and therefore they do not have the financial incentives to go through all that they need to go through, for example, to make their drugs, to take their drugs to market. Number one.
Correct.
Number two, the public health officials who have bought into these systems also benefit financially. They don't ever want to admit that they're wrong about anything. They also don't want the culpability, the liability, the responsibility, any of those things that go along with it. So we keep perpetuating it. The media never wants to admit that they're wrong. They've been proved, 490 million ways to Sunday that they're wrong about most of what they've reported for the last 20 years, even longer. And they don't want to admit that because some are complicit, some just don't want to be wrong. Whatever the reasons are, the media still is sort of vindictive towards parents who don't want to vaccinate their children or to ignore vaccine-injured parents and kids and so on. So the media plays a very significant role in this. And we are now at the point where not only are we discovering that very few vaccines prevent transmission, which was sort of the original purpose in the first place, now we're finding out that even if the vaccine prevents you from getting that particular disease, which it may or may not, your chances or your child's chances of dying from another disease in many cases go up significantly. And if that's not enough, like I stopped taking the flu vaccine because there I am chuffing along in my car one day, sitting at the traffic light on Main Street in my small town. And they were like, oh yeah, the news is reporting that if you get the flu vaccine, you're more than 30% more likely to get flu that season or the next. I'm like, then why am I taking it?
So the
truth is coming out. Yeah, tell me where I'm wrong.
Well, there's that's pretty much entirely correct. I would just put an and or on the reasons of the health officials. Other than that, I completely agree. I'll add that let's start with the last thing you said. Yes, folks who get flu shots not only and sometimes can have more flu. Some studies show. But actually, there's study after study show are more susceptible to non-influenza respiratory infections. Think about that. Non-influenza respiratory infections. There's numerous studies. I cite a bunch of them in my book. So yes, you might actually, in some studies, might be a little less likely to have an influenza respiratory infection, but you're far more likely to have a non-influenza respiratory infection. But
like what?
Go down the list of them. You can go in the studies. I mean, there's a whole host of pathogens, the common cold even. Think about that. There's a whole host of common respiratory infections that you can have.
Bronchitis.
Well, bronchitis would be that would be the symptoms of but a whole host. I mean, because when they do these studies, they'll culture. They want to see, is it influenza? Is it something else?
Yeah.
And what they find is that those who are vaccinated, in many of these studies, end up with a far higher rate of non-influenza infections, which is similar to the DTP studies that found kids who were dying at 10 times the rate. Who they presumably had less deaths from diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, but they were dying, the vaccinated kids, at 10 times the rate as those who didn't get DTP when they conducted these comparisons in Africa. And the kids who were dying at 10 times the rate were dying from reasons they would never attribute to vaccines, like malaria and other infectious diseases. So the vaccine made them more susceptible to other issues.
By lowering their immune system.
Well, it had to have some kind of detrimental immune system impact, which would also reflect back to what we talked about earlier on where chronic diseases that are immune
neurological and autoimmune.
So that's
related.
that piece. Onto the newspapers. The problem with the legacy media is that these reporters are often health reporters, and what I have found is they'll talk to me, but they're really talking to, and their real constituents are the entire medical establishment. If they write negative things about vaccines, or they go in any way too far towards the data, the truth about these products, they're going to get shut out. They're done as a health reporter. They're going to end up, doing a podcast from their garage. They're not going to get to report the news.
Then do the podcast from your garage.
I
have
agree.
a backbone, have some integrity, and your job, first and foremost, is to be honest.
And if they all stood up at once, then great. But they're
one by one, they just pick you off.
But that's.
Hey, but I'm living proof. Look at me, I'm living.
I'm not making to be clear. I'm not making an excuse for them. In fact,
I understand.
You have more probably reach than a lot of the legacy media at this point. In fact, I think they're on their way out the door. And I mean it. I actually tweeted earlier today, I tweeted a response to the reporting on my presentation at ACIP, and I said, I think I wrote something like, you folks just don't get it. I said, during COVID, I said, you haven't pointed out a single error I've made. You just engaged in ad hominem, and you did this during COVID. You went out and you lost most of your legitimacy and your following because of the way you reported COVID. And I said, keep going down this road with childhood vaccines. And when parents across this country eventually figure out and learn that your reporting misled them to understanding the real etiology for their chronic disease, you're done. That's what I wrote. So in any event, I mean that. I think that will be the death knell for them. I think vaccines and childhood vaccines, unless they turn the corner now, it is going to be the death knell for legacy media.
Well deserved.
And well deserved. And then finally, to build on your first point, unlike every other product, the market self-corrects. You don't often have to do your own research. You don't have to think too hard about whether your oven's going to explode.
Or your car.
Or your car's going to explode, as they used to, until they were sued because they wouldn't install this really little backstopper in their gas tanks because they literally had done an internal calculation. You know this famous case with the Pinto? They had done an internal calculation that they would pay less out for like the dozen or two deaths every year from the gas tank exploding than to replace the gas tank on all cars. Okay, but they were held accountable in court and they replaced the gas tank.
And then look how fast that
you don't have to worry about, these building materials, if they cause cancer, right? The market self-corrects for products that cause harm. There's only one product it's not going to self-correct for, and that's vaccines. And that is why you do have to do your own homework. People are like, well, I don't have time. I got a busy life. I get it.
No.
I get it. But on this product, you cannot just rely on the market self-correcting. It won't. And that's also part of why I wrote my book.
Yeah, and you can't rely on, unfortunately, there are, and I know many great doctors, but you can't just rely on your doctor to tell you the truth.
Well, I I would say they're often not lying. Okay, it is because they don't know the truth, and I will tell you why. People think of doctors, pediatricians, especially immunologists and infectious disease experts, as very knowledgeable on vaccines. And I will tell you, I've deposed all of these folks. Okay, they don't know almost anything about vaccines. The only ones who know much about vaccines are doctors who've actually researched them. And let me tell you, those doctors are typically not giving vaccines anymore. Okay.
Yeah, because there's nothing like the facts to get in the way of a good narrative.
Yeah. As long as they're willing to intellectually engage with it. And then there's the vaccinologists. Okay, this is a small little cabal of these folks. And really, that is what the rest of the medical profession looks to when it comes to vaccines. And that's what I explain all in my opening of my book, is that it's the vaccinologists who really set what everything, what then the pediatricians, the infectious disease doctors, immunologists, the CDC, ACIP, all of them follow is what the vaccinologist put out there. And who are these vaccinologists? I've deposed some of them.
Yeah.
I've deposed the world's leading one, Dr. Stanley Plotkin. I've deposed a few of them.
That's Plotkin, right?
Plotkin is the world's leading vaccinologist. Anybody who wants to watch all 9 hours of my deposition on thehighwire.com, you can go watch it and you can judge for yourself. Everybody says, I want to see the vaccine debate. You want to see the debate? Go watch the deposition.
Yeah.
There it is. There's the debate. There's me, 9 hours with the world's leading vaccinologist going through vaccine safety, and you can judge for yourself whether you think that vaccines are safe and effective.
He even acknowledges that they don't stop transmission, certain vaccines.
Yes.
But then says that he still tells people to get them.
There's a reason vaccinologists don't show up when I do like the Senate hearing I just did in front of Senator Johnson, right? Which was going to be about vaccines and vaccine safety in a way, right? Did they send a vaccinologist in a hearing about vaccines? No. They sent a Stanford infectious disease doctor. You know why? In my opinion?
Why?
Because all he knows are the slogans for the most part. And so he'll come in there and he'll, with emotion, but the vaccinologist, he knows. Now, how do vaccinologists rise up the ranks? And I detail this in my book. It's reverse natural selection. The vaccinologists who have the views that are going to result in the most sale of products, which means as little safety, assume they're safe, get them on market as quick as possible. Those are the ones that get patronized by pharma to conduct the clinical trials, to do the research,
I see.
right? So over time,
it's the hand that feeds them.
Right, but pharma's smart because see, the vaccinologists are not changing their views. Pharma is just picking the ones that already have the views. So they think they're independent. And I am sure you confront them. You can watch me confront them about this. They believe they're independent. They take incredible umbrage at the idea that money influenced their views.
Yeah.
And you know what? It probably didn't in a way but you were selected.
Yeah, because nobody came to you and said, hey, I'm going to pay you $50,000 to say this.
Right.
So that didn't happen.
But you know what happened the second they didn't say the right thing, any of those vaccinologists?
They lost everything.
Right.
Kicked to the curb.
They just stopped getting funded. It was quiet.
It's the same system over and over and over again. I talked to a scientist about climate change, and he said, do you know what happens to you if you do a study like that? Because I was like, all these models are false. None of them actually work, and none of them have been proven. They've all been proven wrong over time. And he said, 100%, we know that. And I said, well, then how come there's nobody showing the reality? He said, who's going to fund that study?
You know what happened to a doctor who just relayed the data points that I relayed? And I would say, I made clear, I think, as I talked today, what was my opinion versus what was in a study and what was data. And I framed it when I thought it was methodologically could be better. For that simple conveying that I just did, if a doctor did it, they, trust me, their medical board would want to come after them for it. It might.
Yeah, it might take their license.
Not for necessarily saying what they said in what I just said, but they'll look for somebody who's got some complaint to go after.
They find another way.
Exactly.
Just like I have a friend who was a prosecutor and then and is now a criminal justice attorney. And he said, find me a person, I can find 5 felonies they've committed on a daily basis. Like if you really look hard enough, you're going to find something to hold against everybody. And that's what they do. That's how they get you, right?
Go read the federal criminal code in particular. It's incredible, some of the statutes.
So What are some of the worst things they've said about you? Because you're not popular with this crowd.
I'm not popular in a number of crowds. I'm not popular with the entrenched vaccine zealot federal and state health authorities. I'm not popular with many in the vaccinology community. Oh, they really don't like me, especially the ones I've deposed. And I'm not popular with the legacy media health reporters. So which one are we talking about?
Big Pharma. You're not popular with them either?
Yes, but here's the thing. I'm not so sure I have yes. I'm certainly not popular, but they don't interact with me directly for the most part. I mean, I've got one or two suits that but they're not about. Yes, I'm not popular with them. Let's leave it at that. Sure, 100%. I'm sure they don't like me.
What are the worst vaccines on the market? I mean, in terms of most harmful.
In terms of which is the most harmful vaccine.
Top 3.
Yeah. Well, remember, a child, I will tell you the ones I'm most concerned about, it's about the time period. It's giving vaccines, especially in the first 6 to 12 months of life, especially in the 6 months, where the child's going through critical phases of development. These products are injected in groups. So it's not like, a 2-month-old is going to get a shot of DTaP. It's going to get a shot of HIP. It's going to get a shot of a PCV. It's going to get a shot of IPV. Is going to get a shot of Hep B often. It's going to get rotavirus in the mouth. I'll stop there. Again at 2 months, again at 4 months, again at 6 months. And at 6 months, it would also get a flu shot. They might get a COVID vaccine if they give that too. Then there are other vaccines that they might get, but those are the core ones. And that's a lot already. So isolating which one, like when we often get calls from a parent, I have an issue, well, they just got 5 injections.
Wow, how do you know which one?
How do I know which one caused the kid to go from totally healthy 2-month-old, perfect APGAR score, perfect birth, no health issues, goes in, 2-month-old. We've had cases like this. One really tragic one, ends up seizing, is within a grand mal seizure within 10 minutes, rushed emergency room, dead within 12 hours, no differential diagnosis. Now, obviously, thank goodness, obviously vaccines don't kill most kids. I mean, they don't. Just like, by the way,
not quickly.
Slowly. Well, that's a different issue. Just like most of the underlying diseases don't kill most kids, right? It's hard to isolate which ones. And, if you wanted to, if you were going to be an objective, if you really wanted to do it on that basis, like what is the benefits versus the risks, then you should do, the way you would really do it is you'd say, okay, to a baby born to a non-Hep B positive mother, what is the likelihood of getting chronic Hep B? Some have calculated it's in the hundreds of thousands of needed to inject. So you'd have to inject a few 100,000 babies to prevent one case, or even some say a few million injections. And then you say, okay, that's the benefit. Now what's the risk? That would be the way to really do it. But you don't even see that number needed to treat, because that number is very high. And they don't want to publish that. It's hard to get good data on that, believe it or not. And you ideally don't get the good data on the number that's injured, but I will tell you, it's definitely more than a 1 in a few 100,000 from a Hep B vaccine. So the math starts not looking really good very, very fast.
No, the math becomes very bad, actually.
So I think it's to me, I am personally most concerned about the infant vaccines.
The infant vaccines, and then what else? Top 3.
After the infant vaccines? I mean, the Gardasil vaccine is, we have lots of calls about the Gardasil, but we also have, they all cause injury. I don't want to minimize anybody's harm from any of the vaccines by saying one is worse than the other.
One is worse than the other.
I don't have a vaccine. I don't know of a vaccine where we don't have folks who contact us about injuries.
So
and by the way, that's why it's a licensed pharmaceutical product, because it causes injury. If it didn't, it'd just be sold over the counter. It'd just be sold like food. That's the whole reason it has to be licensed.
One thing I've noticed lately watching television
Yep.
is there's all these commercials for vaccines for things I've never heard of. And sometimes they don't even specify what the vaccine is for. The commercial is just about, feeling this, feeling that, getting older. We have Cologuard or whatever it is, has the solution for you. This is the vaccine you need, call, blah, 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 blah. I don't even know what it's for.
So those vaccines are often, like you said, for folks who are older folks, and they're often just for the elderly. So it's an interesting thing, right? You don't see vaccines for children ever on TV typically.
No, they don't need to advertise because they got the law in their favor.
Exactly. And which is cheaper to do, advertising or getting the mandate passed? Getting it added to the schedule to go to school? Which one costs less money? Far less money than lobbying dollars. If you look at the numbers.
Sure.
So that's part of why I said earlier, what's the most important thing is that all these horror of horrors, what's the last stop on this horror train? Is the last stop, you're going to fix the government? You're going to make pharma companies liable again? Good luck, get that law passed. Good luck getting Congress to repeal that. You're going to get the pharma to do good trials? Good luck. You're going to get the FDA not to be the government and mess things up? Good luck. You're going to get, post-life safety to happen? Good luck. The last stop in all of these this train is the ability to say no without any penalty. That's why, to me, that's what I learned. That's the most important thing. That's why I was giving the example of that person who loves all vaccines. You may today, but if there's a product in the future, like these commercials for these older, trust me, they're trying to get these things required. They're smart. First, they started requiring for preschool, then middle school, then high school, then college, then just the nurses, then all the doctors, then just the preschool teachers. They're expanding those circles.
Yes, they are.
More and more, and they do it in a smart way, chip by chip by chip. And so if you don't stand up now and say no, informed consent is a fundamental right, just as important as freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly. They're going to take away that, and all those rights will be meaningless when you're locked in your house because you won't take a medical product.
Yeah. Well, my daughter is studying to be an EMT, and she had to get the flu vaccine. Otherwise, she's not allowed to show up at ERs and at different clinics and different hospitals. And and we argued about it. She didn't want to do it, but she doesn't see a path forward without doing it.
So she was going to do rotations?
Yes.
So we are able to get people exemptions in that setting. It's the most difficult setting to get an exemption because if you're an employee, we represent employees, there's Title VII, which allows you can't discriminate on a religious basis, employers can't. So if you have a conviction against vaccines, they can't make you take it. It violates Title VII. And if you're an employee at a hospital, you have Title VII protection, okay? And schools can't discriminate because often state law requires the colleges and to provide a religious exemption. But when you're doing clinical rotation, you're not a student and you're not an employee, so you fall in this little Netherland. But we help folks get exemptions in that. We have a way that we help folks across the country get exemptions in exactly that situation.
She's a young girl. She gave it.
I understand.
And she's off at college. I can't. I'm very worried about this, and she was very worried about it. But in the end, she caved to the pressure from her professors, pressure right from herself, because she wants to do her classes and she wants to graduate, and this is her life.
For a product that has, that shows in most studies it does, and in reviews is not contributing to community immunity anyway, and secondly, like we talked about, is increasing according to many studies non-respiratory. And more likely to transmit, even if they're worried about the patients, non-influenza respiratory infections.
Okay, so you are originally from New York, Brooklyn,
Queens.
Yes. You're a city boy.
Yeah, I guess.
I guess living now in Arizona.
Yes.
And you son of immigrants?
My parents both immigrated to the United States. Yes.
So. Really, how did you end up here, do you think, in this position today?
Doing this vaccine-related work?
Yeah, and also and not just doing vaccine-related work, because you've become a voice for a very profound, important principle. This is the principle of individual sovereignty, right? Because the right to choose whether or not to get vaccinated. It is also about your personal, individual sovereignty. We know what this comes out of. I mean, you're Jewish. This the law itself, the principle, always was around, like all other principles. There's nothing new under the sun, right? But at the same time, this was really codified after the Second World War, right, with Joseph Mengele, the doctor of death in the Nazi camps. I mean, because of what was done medically to the Jewish people in the Second World War, we have the Nuremberg Code today, right, which specifically prohibits you from having things like vaccine mandates. And yet it feels like the whole world is shifting to obliterate that history and those principles and take away our individual sovereignty and force people to kneel at the throats of big pharma, big government, whatever you want to call it, whoever's driving this agenda.
Well, I'll answer the first question, which is how did I end up big picture? I think that's what you're asking me. Is I am where I am today because of the promise and freedoms that this country has. Honestly, my dad, incredible patriot, instilled in me an incredible love of America, the freedoms. I mean, he always talked and we had a giant flag in front of our house, and
even though he wasn't born here.
Oh, he was more patriotic than anybody than anybody I've really ever met. Right? He's as patriotic. I've got a giant flag flying in the back, and pole in my house too, and my dad finished 8th grade and worked very hard, and he believed in that. He believed in the core and founding principles of this country that we've aspired to, and over time, and I think that's all they ever wanted me to do was to go to law school, and America, gave that opportunity to my dad, and he, worked hard for me to go to law school, and so I mean, I guess. If that's, I think that's maybe what you're asking about. I'm not sure, but the ability to have the freedoms that we have in this country do allow anybody who really wants to get ahead. I mean, if you want to get ahead in this country, you can. I believe it just requires a lot of hard work and determination. And
that determination has served you well in this fight.
Yeah, it certainly has. And also, my dad and my wife are certainly folks who are uncompromising when it came to what's right. They really are. Mm-hmm. So, if it was right, it just didn't matter. There was nothing you could take away. And obviously, everybody views what's right from a different perspective. But sometimes what's right, but you're like, but with them, right is right. Mm-hmm.
Are you afraid of anything?
Am I afraid of anything? We all, as my dad always said, I'll have plenty of time to sleep when we're in the ground. So eventually I'll go back to our maker.
The 100% of all the certainties in the world, that is number one. We are definitely all going to die.
I mean, so, it's inevitable. I mean, the only thing I would say the only thing I worry for is I would say, the kids coming up in this generation and what does the future have for them? Because obviously that, I think about my kids and my grandkids and are they going to have the same freedoms, the same individual and civil rights that I just thought were a given growing up in this country? I mean, when I was growing up in this country, the idea that you protect the right of the neo-Nazi in Skokie, right, that famous Supreme Court decision to walk through a Jewish town in Illinois, we protected their right to do that, to protect all of our rights, freedom of speech. It was fundamental. You're like, yeah, that's right. We do not like what that guy has to say. It's horrible, but I'll fight to the death for him to say it. That was like a basic, American value I remember growing up with, the Skokie decision. And who brought that case? The ACLU. Liberal lawyers, liberals brought that case back then, right? Do you think those same lawyers, do you think the ACLU today would bring that case? I don't think so. The ACLU today intervenes in my case, is a intervening party roundabout in a case that I've brought to get kids back in school in one of the states in America where I'm trying to restore a religious exemption. Think about that. They're fighting to kick kids out of school so they don't have the civil right to say no to an injectable product that they don't want, most of which don't even stop transmission. So that does concern me. That concerns me greatly about where we're going as a country, because those core principles, I mean, America, in my view, was created as a rebellion against the idea that somebody else should decide how to live your life, whether it's a king, a dictator, a bureau, a committee. That's what it was a rebellion against. It was the idea that we all have inalienable individual and civil rights.
That come from God.
That come from God. And that the greatest harm always comes when you see those rights. To who? It's always the government, okay? Because freedoms come with dangers.
Yes.
Letting you say what you want, letting you assemble,
risk.
letting you practice what religion you want, right? All of these freedoms sure come with it, but the greater danger has always been to cede that to the government. And of course we do in some ways, okay? We don't let everybody have an Abrams tank, fine. But you know, there are, but the idea is that we should always err on the side of protect individual civil rights, not this idea of ceding it to someone else, because the someone else, you know, always becomes the government. And when the government sets the policy, how does government often enforce what they want to do? Coercion, mandates, censorship. You saw it during COVID. And and what worries me is that at least a big portion of this country through COVID has gone away from this idea of individual and civil rights to this collectivism, to we need to cede our rights for the greater good. But who decides the greater good? The government. Exactly. And that concerns me. So what am I afraid of? I'm afraid of that. That concerns me. And you know, and I worry greatly that things are going to go in that direction. And one more tiny piece to it is this. As you go down that road of collectivism, the groupthink ideas that everybody must do X, okay, often stop becoming rational. They become emotional. They don't become grounded in intellect. And then the other has to be dehumanized. And what do you do with people you dehumanize?
Toss them out with the trash.
You do what happened to Charlie Kirk. That's what happens. You're no longer intellectually engaged. We've always fought in America based on different ideas, principles, viciously on the news and papers and pop-eds and so forth. But the line is drawn at violence. That is the line, and it's a thin line that separates us from, not to pick on Somalia, but Somalia, okay? That's what separates us from banana republics. It is that line between, we can fight viciously. We don't have to agree, but we don't dehumanize each other. And when you look at the way the media and the legacy media engages, a lot of it is just ad hominem. It's not substantive. And that can then lead us down an even more concerning path.
So after all of these years of dealing with people who are vaccine injured, is there anyone who stays with you? Any story that stays with you?
There's so many. I mean, the family who was kids in a wheelchair from a vaccine, probably was transverse myelitis, but ended up having an immune reaction that paralyzed them, and then kicked that kid out of school. That was brutal. We've had the infants dying are just. It's not even that obviously losing a baby is tragic, but the way the families are then treated by the medical community is just, those stick with me really hard. I mean, and some of them are just like so absurd. Like we had this one kid who had this rare genetic disorder where typically they die in their teenage years. And he was getting this experimental treatment at the Mayo Clinic, okay? And his Mayo Clinic doctors, who don't have anything to do with vaccines, didn't want him to get vaccines because it could interfere with this experimental treatment. And they threw him out of school in New York. Threw him out of school. We got the kid back in. But this is the time, I mean, just thinking of just truly absurd situations. I mean, some of the folks who have been severely who are harmed and injured. Some of them have been interviewed by Dell on the High Wire, and we've represented a number of those. I mean, I can't do their stories justice. They're just heart-wrenching, when you think about them.
Because they're just, they're just names on a paper, or not even names. To most people, they're faceless, voiceless, but to you, they're real people. These are people that you work hand in hand with, right? That you represent, that you know well. And I always feel called as a journalist, these are the people who, if you understand what they've been through, maybe it helps you understand and have courage and do the right thing.
Yeah. And the parents who feel like, who then they go through this, they will often go into a place of where I did this to my kid. I did this. I took my kid in and I let them do this to my child. Way. And, those parents, so you have the kid who's injured, you've got the parent who's living in the state of just abject regret. It is
it's the worst lottery on earth.
It is.
It's the worst lottery on earth. It's like, there but for the grace of God go I, because we all know as parents it could have been us.
Yeah, and told, and they'll say, oh, it's rare. They don't even want to admit that happens, and to the medical community that wants to try and discount it. Well, it's also, let's just assume that's rare. Okay, what's rare? Injury from a lot of the diseases you vaccinate for. That's rare. But somehow that is seen as the world is going to end, but they give no accord to those who are injured from the products themselves. I could go through lots of injuries. The various types of neuropathies that folks suffer from. Give you an example from COVID vaccine, because I've never seen this with other vaccines. This one's unique. We have a database of endless number of people who contact our firm about various injuries. So, and again, a lot of them are neurological or immune or immune-mediated neurological. They're usually connected because your immune system and your nervous system are really intertwined. But some of the folks who got the COVID vaccine, their nerve endings that have the sensation of heat that you're burning get activated, and their whole body feels like they're on fire.
Wow.
A lot of these folks have killed themselves at this point. And some of them, we represent one of them. Actually, it's the only case for COVID vaccine in the entire country against a COVID vaccine manufacturer. It was behind a Brianne Dressen. She got AstraZeneca's vaccine actually in the clinical trial. And in the clinical trial, she signed a document with them, and they promised various things. So I have a breach of contract claim.
Wow.
Which is why
she is not immune from.
That's right. She is a unique situation to bring a lawsuit. So we're in federal court right now for her, but she lives with the sensation of being on fire 24/7. Could you imagine? I don't even know how.
Said to be one of the worst ways to die, one of the most painful.
It's the most painful way to live.
So she's living that is effect every single day.
It's the most painful way to live. Death might be the only relief.
Wow.
So, that I've not, that one, and I've seen a series of those with COVID vaccine. Different vaccines result in different injuries, but if you look through the package inserts, this is maybe the most troubling part. Most of them disclose encephalitis or encephalopathy, which is brain swelling and brain damage. They're not disclosing that for fun.
No, they're disclosing it to cover their asses. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, and when you cause, brain encephalopathy means brain damage. That's what it means. What are we doing?
Yeah, when you know it causes brain damage. Wow. Well, we have a lot to talk about, Aaron. We have a lot more to come back at on this pediatric pharmaceuticals, whole nother subject, turning our kids into drug addicts from a young age. We didn't even touch on accountability for Dr. Anthony Fauci and all the other people that participated in that crime against the American people, but also people worldwide. So I hope you'll come back on the show. I want to urge people to read your book, Vaccines, Amen. You have to sign it for me before you leave.
Yeah, it'd be my honor.
Very important what you do, bringing the data, bringing that information to this conversation, because it is a tactic of information warfare to push people away from substance and to function only on the emotional side of it. And of course, that doesn't help us make good arguments. So, but most importantly, people just want to be armed with the truth, right? There's no mom out there that wants to hurt other people's kids, but they don't want to hurt their own, right? Nobody wants to be dictated to on that. It's one of our most fundamental, most basic rights to protect us against all kinds of harm, because we saw what happens when you don't have those protections. So can't thank you enough for the work that you're doing and for coming all the way out here to fly over country. I know you have a crazy, crazy schedule. And between your family and your work and all the people that you're helping, it means a lot for people to hear about your work and to understand. We never tell people on this show what to do either. We don't tell them what to think. It's up to you. You decide, but you can't make good decisions unless you have good information to base it on. And that's really one of the big things that you provide. So where else besides your book, Vaccines, Amen, can people find you?
My law firm is SiriLLP.com. So that's, where we do help folks in all kinds of ways on vaccines. And I'm on Twitter, Aaron Siri SG, or AaronSiriOfficial.com. I think has all the different handles and all the different platforms. My folks just set that up for me. And then for the vaccine policy work we do, a lot of it is supported by a nonprofit, ICAN, the Informed Consent Action Network. And I believe you had Dell on, they support most of the policy related work that we do. So I think that sums it up.
Well, so it's a long fight. Policy side of it, legal side of it. There's a lot to it, but it begins with arming yourself with the truth, right? With knowledge.
Absolutely. If you're going to go and get a car for your kid, you probably check the crash
safety
test
data
report, right?
Yeah.
At least you'll do that. And like I said, with these products, you really do, because the market's not self-correct, you do have to do your homework. Mm-hmm. But I would say at the core of why I wrote the book is that if you want to change what happens in the legislative houses and in the courthouses, public cultural cognition needs to change, which is why I came on. I'm doing this sitting here and talking about it. Whether you agree with gay marriage or not, it was never going to become a constitutional right. The U.S. Supreme Court would not have founded a constitutional right in the 1800s. No Supreme Court in 1910s or 20s or 30s. What changed? Did the Constitution change? No. Cultural cognition changed, and that drives outcomes in the courthouses and in the legislature. Okay? So, if we can get enough people in this country to start thinking of these products as products rather than believing in them, they're not good and they're not bad and they don't have to be for them or against them. You just have to think of them as products. We can get to a critical mass where we can come back to a place and we can have rational discussions about them. You can ask questions about them.
Yes.
They can be treated as products. I don't think this chair is good or bad. I'm not anti or pro this chair. It's just a chair, just a product. So are vaccines. And when people start thinking about vaccines that way, stop saying I believe in them. Well, I think that's how we're going to get over to the hump.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I mean, just thank goodness that you're determined and tenacious, because we need every true warrior
we'll get there.
That we can. Okay, so there you are, folks. Vaccines, Amen, by Aaron Siri. You heard how to find him online. Most important of all, ask questions. Don't unknowingly, right, and unthinkingly allow people to do things to your children trusting that they're going to have your best interests at heart, because that is not always the case. So you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe, get this message out to as many people as you can. If you feel so called, you can go to laralogan.com and support our independent journalism. But most importantly, thank you for being bold enough to go rogue with Lara Logan.